Good day, everyone. On behalf of Global Enterprise Connect, I welcome all our viewers to this episode of CXOWIRE, where we are in discussion with Santiago Pontiroli from the Acronis Threat Research Unit. Good day, Santiago, and welcome.
Good morning, Aaron.
Nice to have you here, Santiago. But let's go to the start of our discussion. Now, the Middle East conflict, which is started and going on for almost a month or so, has brought into focus the correlation between technology resilience, which we keep talking about as technology specialists, the physical, which is the heart of physical resilience, and business survival. So enterprises in the regions are now using a host of measures for business continuity, many of which are in play for the first time, right? Because this conflict is something completely new. And so in this episode of CXOWIRE, Santiago, I want you to advise us on how regional enterprises need to relook at their cloud regions, the cloud availability zones for business survival. So Santiago, I want to start with first a basic thing. What is your job role at Acronis? And has this really gone out of the roof with the conflict, with people requesting services, consulting? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. So my role at Acronis is Threat Intelligence Research Lead. So I manage the team in charge of creating threat intelligence reports and feeding IOCs. So that's indicator of compromise, indicator of attacks, contributing to the MDR service. And basically activities like this, awareness, threat research, just trying to spread the word out of what we find in the threat landscape. So we contribute not only to the product, but kind of try to share the knowledge with the entire audience beyond the business customers. Going back to your question about my role or my day-to-day role, it changed, and that's what I say it's a really good question, but it changed in a subtle manner. So my activities remain the same, but I would say the timing and the urgency of everything we do has increased a lot. Because when there is geopolitical tension or there is a conflict in a specific region in the world, there are threat actors that take advantage of this. So if there is a conflict in a region, they will launch a campaign to target someone in that region or vice versa. So it's really, really important for us, for the Threat Research Unit, to act quickly. Because an attack, it happens sometimes within hours, maybe within days. But if you don't catch it, you don't see it, and you don't publish something, you lose it. So it's really important for us to be like super quick.
Absolutely fantastic. But I also want to ask you, from the point of view of Acronis and the Middle East conflict, do you see certain solutions, certain remediation, certain threat intelligence now, which is much more in demand? And like you said, need it in a much faster turnaround time. Give us an update over there.
I would say there has been again a shift. And this happened due to the outage for AWS, because like everyone, including myself, like it's kind of a wide consensus that we think like the cloud is untouchable. Like if you put something in the cloud, it will always be there, and it will always be online. And with the AWS outage, it kind of showed us that that's not the case. And it's not the cloud's fault. It's like a design, it's an architecture fault. And that's why I think you need to consider options such as having multi-cloud designs, hybrid, meaning like private and public cloud designs, multi-regional designs, because when you have a natural disaster or there's a conflict in the region, maybe you won't lose your data because it's being replicated in different availability zones. Maybe it won't. But even if you still have your information, if you still have your data available, you need to be 100% sure that you are still operational. And I think that's the shift. We used to say like uptime or having like a being available for the public to access your service was important. And I think like number one, the priority is being resilient and degrading in a way that you can keep operating. Maybe not at 100%, but you need to be sure that you will keep operating, because even if you have backups, even if you have disaster recovery plans, if you think about business continuity, you need to be ready, because those things take time. Restoring a backup from an offsite it takes a lot of time. And during that time, you need to keep operating. And we are not just talking about businesses, we are talking about hospitals, electrical grid, critical services.
Fantastic. So I think you led into the most important part of the solution for the Middle East conflict, which is that now with the requirement for the multiple cloud regions and multi-cloud availability, obviously Middle East enterprises have to start adopting this process, right? Of putting their data and their business applications on multiple cloud regions, multiple cloud availability zones. So what is the recommendation? How should Middle East enterprises now be migrating their data, migrating their workloads, so that exactly what you said, that it's not just one cloud region or one available zone inside a cloud region that's being used? What's the thinking and how does Acronis look at this? Go ahead, please.
It's a complicated matter, and let me explain why. It's not that the companies or enterprises don't know that multi-cloud solutions are available. It's just that it costs a lot of money. So sometimes you need to put that into play and understand like how critical is your service. And that's why you need to define beforehand which services need to be fully up 100% of the time, and how fast do you need to recover those services if they go offline. But beyond that, when you add different cloud service providers to an architecture, you add complexity. And by complexity, I mean, let's say you use AWS, you use Google Cloud, and you use Azure. Sure, you can have all three, but you need some way to manage the three of them in an automated way. You need a unified security policy, because you cannot say, okay, I have AWS secure, but I forget about the other two. And then on top of that, you have national or regional regulations. So for example, GDPR or things like that. And you can say, sure, I have my data replicated, but replicated where? And is it illegal to do so? And then you add more issues, because you need to encrypt that data, not only between the different cloud providers, but also at rest. So you see what I'm going to. Everything costs more money and adds more complexity, and you need an IT team that can manage three different service providers, and three just considering the top three. The solution from us, from Acronis and from the Threat Research Unit, is integration. So what we are trying to do is to propose like a disaster recovery architecture in which you have everything in one place. You have the EDR, the XDR, you have the backups, you have disaster recovery in a single console. So the idea is to remove the headache out of managing these services, because the more manual it is, the harder it will be for someone to restore that service. And that's why we now advise in general to have, in the past we used to say like the 3-2-1 backup rule, like 3 backups, 2 in different places, 1 offsite. And now we added one more thing, which is 1 and 0. There should be one like a fully verified backup with 0 errors. So we added that part because we noticed that companies and enterprises are doing backups, but they are not checking if the backups works until it's too late. So this is what we are trying to advise people, to be prepared and to have something in place that allows you to manage all this complexity in a single place.
Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. But I just want you to, I mean, the landscape is big, the architecture is complex, but if you just summarize the benefit, the challenges, and let's say the drawbacks. So if you were to say, look, these are the benefits for sure, if let's say the enterprise manages to justify the cost, they prioritize the workloads, they manage their complexity, what's the benefits they'll get? What's the drawbacks in intermediate, and what are the challenges? If you can summarize this, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. So I would say for the benefits, it's resiliency and the ability to degrade the service in a way that it keeps on working, at least at the bare minimum. So you have replicated data, you have, and even beyond replication, you can also, by using a multi-cloud architecture, you can reduce latency. So maybe you can have like a content delivery network. So you can have like points that are called edge points. You can have different places in the globe that are closer to your customers. So you can reduce latency, you can have data replicated, you can have different backups in different places. But the drawback or the negative side of all this is the complexity. When you start adding more and more components to a cloud architecture, you need load balancers, you need cloud computing instances, you need databases of different kinds, maybe relational, not relational. You need some type of cold storage, in some cases for backup. Everything has different costs. And this is where like a cloud architect comes into place, because they can tell you, hey, you need this component and this component and this component, and you will have this type of resiliency. Of course, it depends on your budget. If you want to have like the perfect architecture, you can have it. I mean, nowadays we have pretty much everything we want, but the thing is, it costs money. So those are the benefits and those are the drawbacks. The challenges for me are actually managing the entire thing. When you have multiple cloud architectures, you have it in different regions, you need like a stellar IT team. I mean, nowadays it's even pretty hard to find like one person that can manage like end to end, like just one cloud provider. Imagine finding one that is knowledgeable in all three domains, and on top of that, securing those domains, and on top of that, knowing the regulations, so like you are not breaching or in breach of any like local legislation. So the solution for all of this, again, from my perspective, is trying to simplify as much as possible. You need to take stock or take inventory of what services you need to keep running 24/7, because maybe you do not need your entire stack running, but maybe you need like a public facing site. Maybe you need, if you're a hospital, maybe you need like a, I don't know, some type of patient history. There are some critical services that you always need to have, and there are other services that are nice to have. So that's the first thing you need to do. And then you have, or you need to have your backups and disaster recovery automated. So your backups should be done in an automatic way. You shouldn't be saying like, hey, oh, today is Friday, I should be backing up. No, that's not the way to go about that. You just need to forget it, but check it, verify it, and try to simplify this whole complexity. I mean, because when things like this happen, it could be a conflict in the region, it could be a natural disaster, it could be a failing hard drive, but it will happen. So you cannot say it's in the cloud. It's not enough. You need a backup.
Fantastic. I think very valid points about the complexity and the cost correlation. But let's go to the last part. So obviously, when enterprises and the CIO, the IT department look at these changes, and they have the legacy SLAs in place, what are the sort of changes that they need to bring into the SLAs to make this more relevant to this architecture that you mentioned?
That's a good question, because let's say you're using a multi-cloud architecture. And let's say, for example, there was a hack recently to this company related to healthcare, and they brought down around 200,000 devices. So you can say, yes, we have a backup, but to restore 200,000 devices, it takes a lot of time. And this is where it comes into play, not only the multi-cloud architecture, but hybrid architecture. So you need something in the public cloud, for sure, but you need a hybrid design. So you need your own private copies of the information that is most critical to you. And this is because if you want to restore not even terabytes, like petabytes of information, it will take a lot of time. So again, if you define what's most critical to you and you keep a local copy, then you can restore those services in a much efficient way. But then we go back to the initial problem, which is cost. So in the end, it's cost. But again, there are different options to create these really, really resilient architectures. In my opinion, the best architecture is one that doesn't have you locked in to any vendor, because you don't want to be dependent on anyone. And again, you need part of your infrastructure or your hardware, your services hosted within your domain on premises, mainly because you don't know what's going to happen with any cloud. So it's a multi-cloud, multi-region, and hybrid architecture. The more components you add, the more complex it gets, the more costly it gets. But of course, you can be fully operational within minutes.
Fantastic. So I think we have covered most of the points. And just to summarize, if you were to look at this current situation that we are facing in the Middle East and the best practices and your experience with these type of situations of business continuity, disaster recovery, ensuring there are no errors, the data which is being backed up. So if you were to put some of the key best practices that enterprises in this region should be looking at today, what would you summarize that to be?
So the first one I would change is kind of a myth because you have different availability zones. So within a region, you have an availability zone, and within the availability zone, you have different data centers. So for example, you have US East 1, and then you have 1A, 1B, 1C. So within those, in that availability zone, within those data centers, you have your data replicated, usually, without any cost. That's how it works. But in this case, I remember during this conflict, like 2 data centers were affected out of the 3 that were available in the region. So most of the cloud architects, when they are designing a resilient system, they say, okay, it's already replicated in 2 or 3 data centers. That's enough. I think like the first myth that we need to bring down is like you need to plan for worst cases scenario. So you need to consider a different region. And I understand it's more difficult to set up. Maybe you need to consider again the regulations. It takes time, it consumes bandwidth, storage space. But for me, it was like an eye-opening moment when I saw like 2 out of the 3 data centers were affected. So that would be like, my first recommendation is to, even if you don't go multi-cloud, at least go multi-region. That would be the first one. And then have a disaster recovery and business continuity plan in place before anything happens. Because when the service is offline, it's already too late. You will be panicking. You want your operations to keep on running. And the last one is try to have a solution that is simple for you to use, that it's automatic, it's integrated, that you will keep everything in one place, that you can forget. You can just do your backups, verify your backups, and do disaster recovery from a single place. The more complexity you add to this whole thing, the less feasible it will be for you to actually recover in time. And this costs money again for you.
Fantastic. So some great points which you mentioned over there: simplicity, managing cost, managing complexity, planning for the not just the worst case, but the really worst case situations, and re-looking at the typical simple cloud architecture and making it much more, let's say, resilient or much more forward-looking. So with that, I'm going to come to the close of our wonderful CXOWIRE session. But I will just, before we close, I'll just like to thank all of you. So on behalf of Global Enterprise Connect, I thank all the viewers and Santiago Pontiroli from the Acronis Threat Research Unit for this wonderful thought-sharing session. So thank you, Santiago.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, I think absolutely brilliant recommendations which you made. So thank you over there. And for all the viewers who have joined in, please do join us next time for the next session of CXOWIRE. Thank you once again.